The Orb of Zot. A piece of treasure so mystifyingly fabulous that adventurers from all over the world, of all backgrounds, talents and species, have tried time and time again to acquire. All those who have tried have fought tooth and nail through a mysterious dungeon in the vain hope of reaching this fabled artifact. The dungeon itself is this ever-shifting gauntlet of unknown origin, meaning even if one foolhardy enough to enter managed to escape, their tale would be vastly different from others who have survived. This is assuming there are a substantial amount of beings that have survived, and that is a bold assumption. Quick disclaimer, this video is very long, and covers a game that at the time I'd only been playing for a few months or so. So of course, I made mistakes. To aid this somewhat, I have, while editing, included a small graphic, a mascot of sorts, that marks when something needs more context, info, or is just straight up wrong. The Toe of Truth. You will see this thing pop up a few times, and the timestamp and corresponding info will be in a pinned comment. If you have played this game and noticed something that is wrong that I haven't, then feel free to reply to said comment, correcting my mistake. YouTube loves it when you correct me. Anyway, enjoy. There are very few games that I deem to be masterpieces. And I'm not talking about games that are very good. There are a lot of very good games. I mean games that are truly the peak of their genre, if not the definition of it. Games that have been so expertly crafted that they have you thinking about their mechanics and intricacies even when you're not playing them. I've been playing what I think to be one such game for the past few months. Well, actually I've been playing a lot of games, I don't really do much else. But this one game in particular came into my radar a little while ago, and once I started playing it, my enjoyment of said game has only gone up over the months, as opposed to the usual curve of enjoyment I get when starting something new. And listen, I'm just going to rip the bandage off and show you what it is. I really don't need to extend the length of this video anymore. This is the game. I mean, this is what it looks like. Don't know what you're looking at? Oh, you've played this game before. Well, shh, there are people here simply unaware of how great this is.
I mean, do you think they've ever had the pleasure of slaying such great foes as Sigmund the Dreaded, Elrocker the Cunning, or Raiglotl the Unformed Horror? And surely they haven't visited the many weird and wonderful places in which these beings reside. And one can only imagine having gone about life without being in possession of great and powerful artifacts of old, granting any who wield or wear them mighty unnatural powers. Bro, can you hold the camera straight? My dogs are out.
Well, let me introduce you to Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, a game that I've covered briefly before on this channel, but that short description doesn't even begin to give this game justice. And believe it or not, even this video won't cover everything this game has in store. You see, Stone Soup is a roguelike, but not like what we have today. It is a roguelike in the very traditional sense, which means three things. It is very difficult, it is very complex, and it looks, well, I've already shown you my spreadsheet, so on to the next slide. In this game, you should expect to die a lot. You should be ready to encounter unforeseen horrors and highly skilled warmongers around every corner. But also, shiny loot. It's like gambling, but worse. Expect to have your DNA altered in incomprehensible ways. Only incomprehensible because you were first made stupid. But luckily for you, there is no final boss. Until you realize the true final boss is the hubris you gained along the way. It is a game that, I'll be honest, will take some getting into. But if you stick with me, I'll do my very best to give you the best intro to the game I can. Because despite the difficulty, complexity, and the visuals, I think more people should experience what this game holds. And what it holds are many intricate mechanics, a vast array of charming and soulful levels, and plenty of tales, of both death and glory. Though mostly death. So without further ado, let us embark on a quest that is started by many, but very few manage to complete. Now, I will be explaining things as we go, and for that I prepared a tale of my own. But I will say, for the sake of my sanity, and this video being uploaded within this year, I play on a preset seed. It's not a crazy overpowered seed, it's one that I found myself and simply gave me a pretty good start. And what I'm about to show you is me mostly going into the seed blind, save the first few levels. Our tale is of Manfred. Manfred is a Minotaur, specifically a Minotaur fighter. Why is this our mighty adventurer? Well, to put it simply, there are really only two possible characters in this game. Those who aren't a Minotaur fighter and the 6'8" axe-wielding demigods. That turn this game from a matter of second-guessing every decision you make while frantically hunting for some artifact to carry your weak puny body through the dungeon, to the simple matter of charging headfirst through everything you see until either something doesn't die in at least 2 seconds of you pressing the same button, or until your health bar changes colour, in which case your survival instincts kick in and you read a scroll to instantly teleport you to safety. Okay, jokes aside, you do still need to play methodically even with this brute of a character. This is just how it feels after playing the other race background combos. In short, Minotaurs are naturally very strong, sturdy beings. Then pair this with a background in fighting, in particular fighting with an axe, and you basically set the game to easy mode. Or at least as easy as the game can get. It will still be a challenge. Now that our character is made and we've just passed through the entrance to the dungeon, you will obviously want to start moving about. But you see, you can't just use W, A, S and D. As a matter of fact, the control scheme for this game is probably the biggest hurdle for new players. So I'll explain the controls that you need, but I'm not going to go over what every single key on your keyboard does. Yes, pretty much every key does something. You have 4 ways of directly moving your character. If you are clinically insane, using the designated letters to move will be your go-to. For the people that aren't rocking back and forth in a padded cell, but still have got a few screws loose, then you may consider the number pad. The average person will probably find the arrow keys the most comfortable. And lastly, there's the true Chad way of moving, that is, clicking with the mouse. If you are a worshipper of Zom, you might like to use this method. But there's one last way of exploring that's a nice little blend of all the other methods, and it's what you'll primarily use alongside the other ways of moving once you've gotten used to the game. That is simply by pressing O. Doing so will send your character running around the level at Mac fuck, until they either find something interesting or run into an enemy. Now, attacking something is very simple. You see enemy, you walk into enemy, enemy die. This as well can be done automatically by pressing tab. And thus, you now know the holy combo known as. There is a little Mortal Kombat for our character, which is basically just throwing stuff, but I'll explain that later on. Lastly, I'll fire off some more essential controls. I opens your inventory. You can equip weapons and armor by pressing W and Shift W, respectively. Pressing Shift on his Okay, I went on for like another minute explaining controls. The best way to learn the controls, in my opinion, is to just press question mark twice whenever you want to know how to do something. Honestly, consulting the in-game guides is how I learnt 90% of this game's content and controls. Remember, this game's turn-based, so you can just sit there for like a good 10 minutes until you're ready to move on. One crucial control that I will mention though, is pressing X and then moving your cursor over an enemy, or anything for that matter, and then pressing V to describe it. It's insanely helpful to see what enemies do before you fight them. Right, with the controls out of the way, it's time to start our adventure. Right? So you may have noticed the machine code looking clump of text in the top right corner. Well, these are your stats, and if I didn't explain them to you, you wouldn't get anywhere. So, the green bar is your health and the blue bar is your magic. If the green bar disappears, you're dead. If the blue bar disappears, no more spells. Okay, very tired editing dopey here. The stats here really aren't that confusing, and I did not need to explain every single one. If you've played D&D, which is likely given the nature of this video, you should recognise most of what's here, and the rest is pretty self-explanatory. If not, well, from left to right, armor class, evasion and shield, strength, intelligence and dexterity. The higher these are, the better. Okay, fuck. I know it's been a hell of an info dump so far, and I could go on, but I have a great sense that some of you are losing interest. Hey, wake up. We have an adventure to embark on.
It is still a mystery how this bizarre place was created. Some claim that it is the playground of bored gods, whereas others maintain that it was shaped by all kinds of species who fled the overworld and shunned the light. No matter its origin, this place is filled with riches unheard of, as well as ample dangers to any intruder. Few have escaped alive, and even fewer have escaped with some sliver of sanity sufficient enough to tell the tale. The dungeon is 15 levels deep, but honestly, this is only the beginning.
Wait, hang on, why are we even in this dingy dungeon? Well, as Outside Dopey just said, this place is filled with riches unheard of. The particular piece of loot we are after is the Orb of Zot. Why do we want this? Well, who doesn't want an orb? You can, ponder it and stuff. But you can't just stroll in and take it, like some petty thief. There are a series of runes that must be collected in order to open the gate to Zot's realm once reached. 3 are needed to open it, but there are 15 up for grabs. Said runes are scattered throughout the dungeon's many branches, and getting our first one is what we shall focus on first, as well as building our character's stats and skills. Now, before we start exploring, yes, the adventure has started for real now, we set our skills for training. This menu is opened with M, and for now, we only want to train dodging. Why? Well, our Manfred here has a pair of fine, sharp horns atop his head. We have a chance, when dodging an attack, to gore our opponents with said horns, dealing some extra damage. It's also nice to be able to dodge attacks in general. As for the other skills that we deactivated, well, we don't need fighting and axes at the moment because we are strong enough and we are skilled enough given our background in fighting. The same goes for armor and shields, although as well as this, we only have one piece of armor, which is not the finest, and our shield is small and weak. Exploring the early dungeon is relatively safe, and oh, we got shafted. Whenever this text pops up, one of 3 things is about to happen. You may be dropped down a number of floors, in this case we only dropped 1. You could be teleported to a random location containing enemies on the current level, or you could receive the Sentinel's mark, alerting all enemies in the current level of your location. This event isn't random, but it does feel that way, and oftentimes feels quite unfair. But trust me, you do get used to being absolutely violated given enough time in the dungeon. Since we only dropped 1 floor, we move on with relative safety. And chewing through some more enemies, we managed to reach XP level 3. At level 3, and every 6 levels thereafter, we can choose to add +2 to either strength, intelligence or dexterity. We, being the brute that we are, only want to invest in strength, as strength increases our melee damage. Moving on, we find stairs back up, and we managed to clear the first level. You also may have noticed that we grabbed a few items from the second level. A pair of boots that we equip straight away, don't want exposed toes now, do we? And some jewellery, an amulet of faith and a ring of positive energy. Both of which we don't need right now, and which I'll explain should we use them. We also read the 4 scrolls that we found, which are not known at first, but after reading 1, we discover that they're scrolls of identify. Using them, we can then, well, identify unknown items. In our case, the 3 potions that we found. Moving on to the second floor, we go about clearing the rest. And in true crawl fashion, we encounter our first major threat. Gnolls. These guys are responsible for the most amount of player deaths of any enemy in the entire game. I'm not joking. So, be careful about charging head. Well, good thing we picked up that whip of electrocution. Onward, we pick up some enchanted gloves and a wand of charming. We identify a scroll we found and move on. Dungeon 3 greets us pleasantly with a centaur. Now, anything marked with a red square is considered by the game to be a significant threat to us. And certainly, this centaur would have been, were it not for the fact that these horse-brain creatures only carry bows. Meaning the tight corridor that we were in easily let us close the distance and slap it to death with our whip. This granted us a good chunk of XP, and our dodging skill met its set target of 5. So we then set axes and fighting to train and move on. After clearing out most of the level, we soon run into our first unique enemy, Robin. A hobgoblin commanding a small militia of fellow goblins. He is usually not too much of a problem, especially if you fight him and his army in a narrow corridor, which, by the way, is the optimal way to fight anything in this game. Remember, if something has a blade, it can't hit you with said blade unless it is next to you. Robin met his end pretty quick. But then we soon encounter another unique goblin, Ijib the Twisted Goblin. She is more of a threat than Robin, having more health, and more importantly, she wields a random wand. But she's easily beaten in melee combat. Exploring the rest of the level, we find some poison darts and a wand of polymorph. The darts in particular we'll be using quite a lot, and I'll explain when to use them once we do. And lastly, in a small grove of trees, we find the infamous house of Crazy Yeof, the Enlightened. He is a deranged gnoll wielding a staff of chaos, and he wears a cloak. We wanted that cloak, and we were willing to put our entire run on the line to be hit with his staff of chaos, which, by the way, inflicts you with random harmful effects, oftentimes killing you in 1 or 2 hits. But in our case, the roll of the dice was in our favour, and we struck the old man down where he stood, taking only his cloak. The next level was largely uneventful. We did start to see some more difficult enemies, an orc and a jelly, but nothing we couldn't cleave straight through. We did find a broadaxe, which we started using instead of our starting one, but nothing too crazy. Dungeon 5, however, is where we got a chance to use those poison darts we picked up earlier. You see, going forward, our strategy for dealing with enemies that we deemed to be a decent threat would be to first use any ranged items we have to chip away at its health, and or apply damaging effects. So once the foul creature reaches us, it is in a severely hindered state after receiving enough poison to kill a herd of elephants, and if it was threatening enough, likely had several different magic wands cast upon it. Which reminds me, to throw something it must first be quivered. Done so with Shift Q. Then you can either press F and select a target with the plus/minus keys, or press P to instantly fire at the nearest enemy. Or, just click on the thing. It is also on this level that we've encountered another enemy that can be tricky to deal with early on, that being an orc wizard. On their own they aren't too bad, but they like to cast confusion on you and go invisible. Then pair this with whatever may be lurking around the corner, and you could end up getting in a world of trouble. This doesn't always happen, but you can never be too careful. After clearing the level, we had grabbed several notable items. Some better armor, a collection of scrolls and potions to identify, and a +4 Ring of Slaying. This ring is very much a blessing early on, granting us +4 to our weapon's damage and accuracy. Accuracy being the chance to hit things. We also turned on armor for training, since we now had quite the collection of garments. Delving deeper, we hear the sound of rushing water, which meant somewhere on our level there was a sewer. Now, you may think, what could possibly be of any use to us in a sewer? Well, there are quite a few of these timed portals that can be found when adventuring, and they usually hold, at the very least, a handful of scrolls and potions, and at the most, some magical artifacts. So checking them out is always worth doing. And yes, I did say timed portals. These things don't last forever, and so long you're in the level containing it, it will slowly be disappearing. In our case, the entrance to the sewer was rusting away. Before we reach the sewer though, we find the stairs to the Ecumenical Temple. This place is always in the dungeon and does not disappear over time. While it may appear visually different from adventure to adventure, it will always contain a great many altars dedicated to the many gods of this world. At this point, we did not worship any god, and we were looking for one to take us under their wing. Continuing without one would be foolish, as each god grants unique abilities to its followers, as you prove your devotion through gaining piety, of course. As we were a talented melee fighter, we were looking for one to complement that, and we had a few options. Warmaster Okawaru, the god of battle, would have been a good pick, granting us abilities that increase our prowess in melee combat, as well as gifting us throwing weapons as we gain piety, and a piece of armor and a weapon of our choice once we reached max piety. Certainly a fine god to worship, though he forbids us to gain allies, and gaining piety from them requires us to slay powerful foes, so we look elsewhere. Trog the Wrathful is the god of anger and violence. Though very crude, their berserk ability is a force to be reckoned with. It is similar to Okawaru's combat ability, in that it enhances melee combat greatly. Except, while berserk, we cannot perform crucial actions such as reading scrolls or drinking potions. And because of this, we turn our head elsewhere. Makleb the Destroyer is the god of bloodshed and the mortification of the flesh. While they are a truly evil deity, for someone primarily fighting in melee combat, their abilities are some of the most powerful. First, we get a passive, piety-based chance to gain health from killing. The amount healed is based on the level of the enemy. Then, their two invocable abilities are Unleash Destruction and Infernal Servant. The first being a random blast of destructive energy, be it fire, cold, electricity, or negative energy. Though, as we gain piety, this ability becomes stronger and is attuned to one of the 4 hells. The second ability summons a random demon, and based on how good your invocation skill is, the demon that is summoned is stronger. There is a catch though. When summoning a demon, there is a 1 in 6 chance of also summoning a hostile one. But when this happens, your friendly demon becomes stronger. Finally, at max piety, we are given 3 infernal marks. There are 9 marks in total, and which ones you get are completely random. I won't explain what each of the marks do, only the one we get later into the adventure. A god that deserves an honourable mention is Kazlao Stormbringer. They wouldn't have boosted anything melee related, but they would have let us turn elemental vapours into sentient elementals, and given us the ability to nuke stuff, making him very effective against large groups of enemies, and starting heated arguments with purple French mimes. Out of the many gods, Makleb is who we end up worshipping, and after doing so we equip the Amulet of Faith from earlier. This isn't required, but does it just lets us earn piety faster, so we can get our infernal marks sooner. It does mean that we lose some piety once we take it off. Back in the dungeon, we venture on to find the sewer. We eventually find the entrance, which happened to be guarded by a group of gnolls and a handful of sewer-related creatures, and after clearing them, we enter. Now, these places are usually pretty small, and often don't contain any enemies that are too troublesome. Though, if you do run into a red threat enemy, there's usually only one to worry about. A tip about combat that applies here, and will apply later into our story, is that you don't want to be fighting enemies while in water. Here, it's not too much of a requirement, though it's still best practice to not give any enemy the upper hand. The sewer was largely sparse, loot-wise only containing scrolls and potions, so with it cleared we head back to the dungeon. Exploring the rest of the level, we find some twice enchanted boots and some plate armor, both of which we equip straight away. The plate armor in particular is a welcome find, boosting our armor class by a good amount. We do lose some evasion, but this could be trained back later. Then, after picking up a wand of ice blasts, a very good one to have, and setting our throwing skill for training so we can get better use out of our darts, we head down to the next floor. We start this level by finding another +4 Ring of Slaying, boosting our damage and accuracy once again. Then we find a vault containing a player ghost. Vaults, not to be confused with the branch, can be found throughout all levels, and usually contain some pretty high level enemies, though usually along with some juicy loot as a reward. In our case, the vault was inhabited by several ogres and the ghost of Golb, Lord of Chaos. We sensed that this ghost was previously a very accomplished adventurer, so we avoid going in. Marching on, we start to have some pretty hairy encounters. You see, at this point we were about halfway through the dungeon, meaning nastier enemies were starting to pop up, trying to end our adventure. A small swarm of killer bees happened to reside on this floor, and without any poison resistance, they were almost the end of our dear Manfred. Though we managed to push through and clear the level. As we adventure on, our biggest concern was the lack of poison resistance. Those bees were a sure reminder that anything capable of inflicting poison could, given the chance, easily kill us. Perhaps not directly, but rather, getting poisoned while fighting a group of foes would certainly be a problem. Though it is not known by our young Minotaur at this point, I will tell you now that this particular resistance is not acquired until much, much later on. The next couple of levels were somewhat more of the same. We did encounter Maurice the Thief on Dungeon 8, but we made short work of him. Dungeon 9, notorious for being as far as a lot of adventurers delve, was in our case not too much of a challenge, and in fact brought us fortune. You see, we could have continued down into the dungeon to D10, 11, 12, all the way down to 15. But doing so would have almost certainly resulted in our demise, as such levels hold creatures we weren't quite ready for just yet. So, where do we go? Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are branches to the dungeon, offshoots and passages leading to completely different environments. The one we had been hoping to find, and had now stumbled across on D9, was the Lair of Beasts. And so, after almost getting our teeth kicked in by a vampire and a troll, we were ready to enter the first branch of the dungeon.
Many adventurers find the Lair of Beasts to be an exciting change of climate, and indeed, there is something to be said about getting gored, mauled and eaten, rather than sliced, burnt or stabbed.
Entering the lair, we were straight away met with a Kotobla pass. Now, despite the goofy name, these things can be pretty damn annoying to deal with. They have one ability, Petrifying Cloud, and they love to relentlessly spam you with this thing until you turn to stone. Luckily, it was far away enough from the stairs that we could get a good amount of poison stacked on it, and we managed to kill it. After that, we were free to explore. Now, some notable things about the lair. The layout of the levels are completely different. There aren't as many narrow corridors to make fights easier, and instead there's more of the opposite. Large open spaces and passageways that make getting swarmed very easy. especially considering quite a few of the enemy types here travel in groups. Yaks fall well into such a category, and are also one of the top killers of adventurers. The first level here though is often not too bad, and the same went for us. We cleared out most of the level with ease, and even happened upon a sack of spiders. One of the many miscellaneous evocable items, this one allowed us to open it and cover the surrounding area with webs and friendly spiders. It could be used as many times as we wish, but it does need to be recharged with experience after every use. Soon we clear the level and move on, setting some skills to train before entering the next floor. Another great threat of the lair are the multi-headed hydras that call this and other foul places their home. As you should know, hydras have the ability to regrow extra heads should one get chopped off in battle. This of course can be countered by having a weapon branded with fire. Though should you fight one with anything else bigger than a short sword lacking said brand, and it can easily go from 8 heads to upwards of 20. And I'm sure I don't need to explain why getting hit 20 consecutive times in one turn is bad. Luckily, there were none such creatures lurking on the second floor. There was though Gastronok the Ponderous, a powerful elephant slug mage that did get some good hits in on us, but after we gave him a heavy dose of poison and a few swings of our axe, he was soon no more, and we got to take his hat that let us see the invisible. The third level swiftly reminded us that we were not welcome here, as a second malevolent force filled the lair and teleported us to a nearby grove of trees, inhabited by 2 Spriggan druids. Like most competent spellcasting enemies, these guys can dish out some decent damage, though they lack armor, making them vulnerable to melee strikes. They did force us to use a potion of heal wounds, but given the fact they got right up close, we managed to kill them. What also lied within the grove was the entrance to our first branch of the lair, the swamps, although we completely passed it by given it was shrouded in fog, though we weren't ready to go into such a place yet anyway. I'll explain more about these branches in a moment. The piety we got from killing the Spriggans and the few other creatures in the grove was enough to bring us up to max, granting us our 3 infernal marks I spoke about earlier. So we head back to a safe area to partake in some self-mutilation. The 3 marks we got were as follows: the Mark of Atrocity, the Mark of the Tyrant, and the final mark, the one we ended up choosing, the Mark of Carnage. This one would now make our infernal servants summon adjacent to a random enemy, instead of near us, and when summoned they now did so in a blast of our characteristic destruction, which we and our infernal servants were immune to. Our characteristic destruction was gained a short while back, and was attuned to the Iron City of Dis, one of the 4 hells, and meant our servants now unleashed a blast of either acid or metal splinters when summoned. Having chosen our mark, we carve it into our flesh. We then remove the Amulet of Faith as it was now no longer needed, and we continue clearing Lair 3. At this point we started to see some more powerful foes. A Death Yak showed up, but ended up not being too much of an issue. We also found a Cloak of Willpower, though it wasn't going to be that useful to us here, it would certainly be later. Of course, given that we were this deep, we were bound to run into a Hydra sooner or later. The one we found happened to have a good 6 heads upon its necks, and would have certainly been difficult to fight up close. We did manage to trap it in a net, though we didn't make use of this at all, given that we tried to poison it with darts. Hydras are resistant to poison. Then we used some wands to chip at its health, we trapped it again, and managed to kill it. Yes, this wasn't the most spectacular of fights. Some may say we were even cowardly, but given our level and our current gear, that thing could have easily put an end to us. The rest of the level was largely empty, though we did find the entrance to our second branch of the lair, the Snake Pit. Now, there are 3 branches to be found in the lair, 2 of which can change from adventure to adventure. For example, the Snake Pits could have been replaced with the Spider Nest, or the Swamp with the Shoals. The third branch, the Slime Pit, is static, and its entrance is always found in the lair. Each of these branches will contain a Rune of Zot. But we weren't quite ready to delve into such foul places yet. The 4th level of the lair was the most empty of them all. We found an Amulet of Reflection that we equipped to get a chance to reflect incoming ranged attacks, but other than the usual couple of potions and scrolls, there was nothing else here. So we moved down to the 5th and final floor. Most branches of the dungeon have what I like to call a finale level, where the worst and most dangerous creatures that branch has to offer can be found in varying amounts. Usually you're in for a fight, but as a reward, should you clear the level, there is sometimes a handful of loot. I say sometimes because I have fought tooth and nail on such levels and received nothing more than a couple of potions. In our case, the finale level consisted of a central marshland, broken up with white stone ruins. This is where the majority of the level's enemies were resting, and given its watery nature, a few merfolk had even taken a liking to this place. Of course, there are a few hydras lurking about, and the lack of a flame-branded weapon meant heavy use of our abilities and many wands. Eventually though, we managed to penetrate into the centre of the ruins, revealing a small cornucopia of items. Among these items, there was another powerful evocable item, the lightning rod, and our first artifact, a +8 trident named Jellybane, with a protect brand, and it increased the wielder's strength by 4. Now, we had spent all this time training axes, but we do switch to this trident for the time being, only because our current axe was weaker, and this trident had the aforementioned brand and strength buff. We then cleared the remaining parts of the level, almost getting absolutely thundercutted by a death yak, and at last, the lair was done. From here, we had a few options as where we could go next. First, there were the 3 lair branches, Swamp, Snake, and one I forgot to mention we found, the Slime Pits, that were also on Lair 5. This one was ruled out straight away, as its entrance was guarded by several azure jellies. Not that we'd even stand a chance of surviving in there yet. Swamp and Snake were certainly better options, but still, both were a good deal more difficult than the lair, and we lacked any form of poison resistance. That is damn near required for both of those places. So, unless we had a boatload of luck and a few miracles on our side, we would likely die. So, where do we go? Well, if you remember, we left the dungeon on level 9 to enter the lair. Level 9 of 15. We still had 6 unfinished levels of the dungeon to clear, and 6 levels where we could, maybe, find some poison resistance, or at least some more artifacts. So back through the lair we crawled, emerging once again in the familiar halls of the dungeon. Now, Dungeon 10 and beyond was to hold much more fierce enemies than the levels before it. There would be no shortage of orcs and ogres, orc mages and priests as well, but deeper down, even ogre mages. Slime creatures are another thing to be cautious of. They are another enemy, like hydras, that can get increasingly more powerful the longer you fight them, for they often travel in groups, and will meld together should they find you. You do not want them to do this. Once only 5 of these things merge together, it can easily have double your health and be capable of killing you in 1 to 2 hits. Kobold demonologists are also quite common this deep down. They are weak and will go down quite quick, but if you let them, they will surround themselves with a number of demons. It's best to not let them do this. Dungeon 11 proved to be quite beneficial, although at the cost of being an absolute bloodbath of pretty much the worst the late dungeon can hold. However, we came out on top, now wielding yet another evocable item, Gel's Gravid Tambourine, that could pull a group of enemies together, in the process damaging them and holding them still for several turns. We also got an upgrade to our shield, in the form of a kite shield of resist fire. A welcome resistance to have now, and would prove very useful later on. This level also contained the entrance to the Orcish mines, though like the lair branches, we weren't quite ready for that can of worms. Now, I would like to point out here a few key attributes that are nice to have while this deep down in the dungeon. The first we already had, that being the Amulet of Reflection. There tends to be a lot of centaurs and other creatures with ranged attacks, and this basically just gives them the middle finger, while also potentially killing them. The second are actually 3 things: resist fire, cold, and electric. They're not as important here as they are in later areas, but still, if you can get a few of these without compromising the last attribute I'm about to mention, they're nice to have. The last one is willpower. Willpower is your ability to resist certain magical effects, such as confusion from orc mages. Here in the late dungeon, however, it is almost required, and we only had 1 point of willpower from our cloak. Not nearly enough to resist the devilish curses wielded by the creatures found this deep, as you'll soon very much see. Our first mishap was with an ogre mage, who managed to paralyze us, although the only other thing nearby was a centaur warrior, so it actually wasn't a problem at all. It was what, or rather who, we encountered next that was the issue. Elroka, the Cunning, is a unique ogre mage wielding some particularly nasty spells. Now, us, at this point being quite cocky and unaware of how low our willpower is, go right into attack mode and start slinging poison darts at Elroka, instead of doing the correct move and stepping out of line of sight and quaffing a potion of enlightenment to buff our willpower. She only had 2 spells that could affect us. One, a fireball, though this wasn't a problem given how strong we were and we had some fire resistance. But the other was a funny little spell called Banishment. Banishment, well, banishes you. Where to? you might ask? The Abyss is not a place you want to be, unless you came here on your own accord looking for the Abyssal Rune. But for us, it was potentially the end of our adventure. The Abyss is a constantly shifting space filled with a manner of horrific creatures, a lot of which are incomprehensible masses of ooze and tentacles. But there are also a great deal of undead and demons here. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, though it is pretty bad to get banished this early on. So, how do you get out of this hellhole? Well, there are a few ways. First off though, don't make the mistake of going deeper. This will not help you get out. In our case, we got lucky and were only banished to Abyss 1. The deeper you go though, the more difficult the horrors of this place become. It does increase the chance of an exit spawning, but honestly you'll probably die before that happens. Another way out is to find and pray to an altar of Lugonu, the god of the Abyss, but that would mean abandoning your current god and facing their wrath. If, like us though, you are capable of holding your own in here, and you haven't immediately died, killing enemies is probably your best bet. The more you kill, the higher the chance of a gateway spawning, with higher XP enemies giving a higher chance. So, that is what we did. Until finally, a shining gateway emerged and we could leave this wretched place. We instantly hunt down Elroka, and this time she doesn't get a chance to banish us. However, the Abyss had led to us inheriting some less than ideal mutations, the majority of which were actually temporary, but we did have the permanent inability to read after being injured. The only way to remove this was to quaff potions of mutation, and hope we didn't get any more bad ones. The first potion we quaffed seemed to have been cursed by Zom, but once we quaffed the second, it removed the bad mutation and even made us slightly more agile. Now, I did say that we got some temporary bad mutations. These could not be removed with the potions. But at the time, I was stupid, and didn't know they would wear off eventually. So instead of continuing, we drank all of our potions of mutation in hope to remove them. This, of course, did not work, and we ended up with the exact same permanent mutation that we initially wanted to remove. Regardless of this, we pressed on, knowing that potions of mutation aren't all that rare, so we wouldn't be with this debuff for very long. Sure enough, the next level granted us with one such potion, which after drinking, did remove our inability to read after injury. It also made us stupid. We were now on the final level of the dungeon. So, of course, we had to be instantly met by one of the nastiest unique enemies there is. Rupert. Do not let his name deceive you, for Rupert the Wild is very strong. He is a human berserker, meaning he can go berserk, meaning his branded two-handed weapon of choice can and will quickly end your adventure. To top things off, he also has the Confuse and Paralyze spells, so if you lack the willpower, like a certain somebody, you will either be stumbling around trying to swing at him, or you'll be stuck in place while he puts his great axe through your skull. We do manage to kill him though, using a potion of might and swiftness to simply outdamage him, with the help of a summoned demon as well. With him gone, the rest of the level was a breeze. We did come across Nezos, the Mark Centaur, but he decided to surprise us from around the corner and got f***ing annihilated in the process. And with that, the dungeon was now cleared. And here, at the bottom, lay the entrance to the depths, which among other passageways to other devious locations, contained the door to the realm of Zot. But you should know full well by now that we weren't about to dive into a place like that. Besides, we needed runes. 3, if you remember from the beginning, and if you remember again, there were 3 places in a certain lair that happened to house such runes. One of those being
a swampy wasteland. The swamp is filled with ooze, muck, flies, and large slavering carnivorous monsters.
the entrance to this grim place. As you remember, we walked past in the Lair of Beasts, shrouded in fog and most likely emitting a foul stench. Entering the swamp without a lick of poison resistance was less than ideal, but there wasn't much of a choice. Upon entering, we were gently reminded of one of the golden rules when navigating the swamp. That is, unless you have the ability to fly, you should always stay out of the water when fighting enemies. The same thing applied back when we visited the sewer, but here, fumbling attacks is all the more dangerous. Sometimes it is unavoidable, In our case, we got dragged into the water by several swamp worms. Now, just because a lot of the enemies here inflict poison, doesn't mean that using poison darts on them won't still be effective. Sure, there are a number of creatures here that have resistance to poison. Hydras and bunyips and swamp dragons are some notable ones, but unless it'll cost you getting hit, throwing darts are still very useful. Of course, having no poison resistance ourselves was bad enough, but to add insult to an already dire situation, we soon encountered Kirky, Weaver of Myths, who promptly transformed us into a pig. Though of course, we did not let this slide. The first level of the swamp was cleared out without too much trouble, and we managed to keep this momentum into the preceding floors. Since Hydras were still a decent threat to us, we managed to finally brand our axe with fire, allowing us to now fight those things with relative ease. The lack of poison resistance still loomed over us, however, so we ended up taking the scales of a swamp dragon to satisfy this need for the time being, though at the cost of a chunk of our armour. With these new requirements, navigating the foul bog became a good bit easier, although we did still have some hairy situations, but these were purely down to our bad positioning. Trekking through the mud, Mara, Lord of Illusions, made an appearance. He can be quite the foe with his ability to make exact copies of you and himself. We did not give him any chances, knowing full well that such a sorcerer should not be left to fester, especially since we were now on the fourth and final level of the swamp, and the decaying rune was almost in our hands. It did not come without a fight, however. The runes tend to be somewhat guarded, usually within some enclosed structure. In our case, the only place it could have been was in a stone ruin. That entrance was being shrouded in harmful freezing vapours. Once we navigated past this and made our way inside, there were some appropriately lurking simulacrum beasts who met their swift end by our flaming axe blade. Then there were dragons. One, a swamp dragon, who we were not so concerned about, but rather the one of ice, as we did not have any resistance to its freezing breath. We managed to back out and kill the other enemies before re-entering and equipping a ring of resist cold. This just about saved us, and we defeated the thing with the help of our old faithful poison darts. The first chamber of this ruin was cleared, but the second brought more elemental foes. This time it was a fire dragon, although we made short work of that thing using our unleashed destruction. Then came another ice dragon and an onslaught of swampy creatures that, despite them surrounding us, we managed to hold our ground on and defeat. And at last, we laid eyes on the decaying rune of Zot. The first of three needed to open the gate. Picking it up, we feel its power.
The corridors of the snake pit are home to all varieties of serpents, and inhabited by a powerful society of naggers and salamanders.
It was this dreadful place we were heading to next, with its twisting, deep green stone walls, presumably built by the similarly twisting and slithering creatures that inhabit them. The entrance, of course, was back in the Lair of Beasts, laying at the back of a particularly snake-shaped cavern, and wasting no time, we delved inside. Now, if you thought having no poison resistance in the swamp was dire, having none here would be damn near a death sentence. However, the sharp-eyed among you may have noticed that we now had a ring of resist poison. We had indeed taken it from a Spriggan rider back in the swamp, but without noticing while in the heat of battle. We did have some trouble trying to actually enter the snake pit, given the entrance was being guarded, but using the old faithful technique of dancing enemies back up and down the stairs, we managed to infiltrate. Only to be then met by Isil, the neglectful guardian. We tried at first to simply cut the beast down, however we were unsuccessful, and almost met our end trying to crawl to the safety of the staircase. In the end, we decided to try the exact same thing, but this time quaffing a potion of swiftness, and this time Isil was no more. Now, another important resistance to have here is resistance to fire, due to the abundance of salamanders deeper down. Though we already had this on our shield, which we kept equipped, despite finding a bigger one. Also, willpower is important to have, as some of these serpentine creatures here are capable of casting some pretty nasty spells. Crawling through the first floor, we soon encounter another unique, Wiglaf, the Gunner Dwarf. He gave us a decent fight, but not enough to send us retreating, and once he was dead, we took his, quote, stupid-looking hat. Although this stupid-looking hat happened to be 3 times enchanted, along with having poison resistance and a +2 to slaying, and given our current surroundings, we thought it anything but stupid. The rest of the level was much less eventful, bringing only more snakes to our blade. Something that floor 2 of the snake pit didn't contain a whole lot of, which was fortunate considering that we found ourselves in a large open hall. This floor actually granted us with a few good shops, containing a variety of wares, even including some artifacts. However, the only things we purchased from them were scrolls, mainly scrolls of teleportation and blinking, for escaping any less than ideal situations, should they arise. We cleared this floor with ease, and moved downwards. The next floor greeted us with a large party of simulacrum beasts, naggers, salamanders, and for some reason, a few undead and spectral creatures. It was indeed a sizable group of foes, but at this point, most of the beings it contained were mere fodder. With that minor inconvenience out of the way, the rest of the floor was cleared swiftly, albeit with a small hiccup, in the form of a malevolent force marking us for all to see. But at that point, most with the ability to see were already dead. It was, though, here that things took a very sharp turn, one that could have very well led to our death. We now had one floor left to clear, the floor containing the next rune, and we thought it was soon to be in our hands. Oh, how very wrong we were. You see, the last floor, though we were completely unaware at the time, was stitched up tight, with the 4 staircases leading down to it being heavily guarded by some of the nastiest things the Snake Pit has to offer. This was to be one of the most memorable parts of our adventure, and so I've given it a name: the Battle of Coil and Chaos. It began with the encountering of Mlaeglotl, the Unformed Horror, a demon prince turned into a twisted mass of corruption, who decided this place to be his dwelling. After an unsuccessful attempt at killing this creature, given the sheer amount of serpents that had come to his aid, we retreated to seek another way down. However, the second staircase we tried only led to more misfortune. Vashnia, the elite marksnagger, also happened to reside on this floor, with her band of sharpshooters now aimed unmoving at this particular set of stairs. And given that she possessed the ability to teleport us into however many serpents she had lined up behind her, we did not want to pursue this way down. This left only 2 possible staircases that we could traverse. The next one we tried was, this time, quite safe, and looked like a decent place for a fight. It also happened to be right above where we found Vashnia, and this is where the battle begun. After a while, we managed to fight our way out of the small corridor. Vashnia was dead, but many more serpents were already ready with blades in the surrounding halls, and Mlaeglotl was still somewhere, yet to show his face again. There was also an icy archway on this floor, but it being a timed portal, it had long been melted, and besides, this floor was far from cleared. An alarm trap triggered by one of the many snakes sent the fight into a game of cat and mouse, moving from one area to a completely different one as we used our teleportation scrolls. It ended with us narrowly escaping Mlaeglotl, while on the very brink of death. After recovering, we then re-entered where we first encountered the wretched beast, meeting him soon after and destroying him for good. And then, finally, after clearing out the remaining serpents and salamanders, we entered the only place not covered with blood or altered by corruption. Sure enough, there lay the Serpentine Rune. Picking it up, we feel its power.
Orcish mines are filled with cave orcs native to the dungeon. They're humanoid labourers and piles of freshly mined gold. Enterprising merchants have set up trading posts to help relieve the orcs of the latter.
There was nothing else in the hall where we collected the rune. However, exploring the last nooks and crannies of the level, we found and identified a scroll of acquirement. These are powerful and very rare scrolls that will grant the reader a selection of usually quite good items. Only one item can be chosen and acquired. We ended up choosing a fairly good axe, with a protect brand and 2 points of resist cold. Now, with the aftermath of the battle in the snake pit still strewn around us, we knew that there was more of this to come. However, unlike the fight that had just gone down, the next one to happen would lean much more in our favour. The Orcish mines are, believe it or not, filled primarily with orcs, a group of enemies that at our point in the adventure were among some of the weakest. The only reason we had left going here this late was so we could get our willpower to at least 3 points, so we could resist the magics of orc priests, sorcerers, mages, and any other magic wielders that should lurk down there. We were about to face a legion's worth of orcs, but this was to be more of an extermination rather than a battle. We did get into a little trouble with Donald the adventurer, given he could haste and might himself at will, but we were not about to lose our adventure to a man named Donald. With the mines now cleared, we had access to a handful of merchants that resided here. We also, while clearing this place, picked up another powerful invocable item, the Phantom Mirror, that when invoked could make an exact friendly copy of any enemy currently in view, of course having to be recharged after use. After browsing the merchant's wares, we ended up purchasing a very nice artifact ring and some plate armor of resist fire. Now, we had cleared the mines a lot quicker than the previous branches, due to the fact that there are only ever 2 floors of this place. But we had in fact missed a small section. This section, blocked by an alarm trap and so avoided by auto-exploring, contained the entrance to the Elven halls, though we weren't looking to head there yet, and so we took no notice of the area that we had missed. The place we had decided to head next was much fouler than the clean, elaborate halls of the elves.
The depths are the deepest part of the dungeon proper, subject to the corrupting influence of the realm of Zot, without being considered part of it.
The depths of the dungeon house many entrances to many foul places, among them being the realm of Zot. Of course, at this point we had no possible way to enter, having only 2 runes. We were heading there to simply have the chance at more powerful items, merchants, and to sharpen our skills. Now, the depths are quite the test for your physical armor, willpower, and especially your elemental resistances. All the more if you headed here somewhat early, like we did. We were made well aware of our lack of electric resistance as soon as we entered, being swarmed by spark wasps that forced us to quaff a potion of resistance. This, though, was not as hairy as an encounter we had just soon after, as after turning a corner we met Soyobo, Queen of Tengu, to which we took one look at her stat sheet, did nothing with that information, and decided to just quaff a few potions and start swinging, which of course ended with us almost getting killed, had we not drank more potions to heal ourselves. The rest of the first level went a lot smoother, aside from us getting shafted, though we recovered without issue. It wasn't until on the next floor where we got another malevolent force that things started to get a bit more dicey. There were a few enemies on this floor that should ideally be dealt with on their own, or at the very least, not with a whole floor's worth of creatures behind them. Mainly the Flayed Ghost, that so long you're in line of sight will attempt to cut your health in half, as many times as it wishes. No amount of willpower is able to resist this. It can only be resisted by having resistance to negative energy. Basically, you have to think positively, so the scary ghost doesn't end your adventure simply by existing. We did not have this resistance, so we wisely retreated and re-entered via a different staircase. The situation now ended up being much less troublesome, but raises a good point about baiting enemies out. Facing a couple of foes at a time is, obviously, much less tricky than the onslaught we decided to fight. The rest of the floor was now quite sparse of enemies, and we cleared it swiftly, before heading down once again. The stairs down got violently covered with blood after fighting Jory, the bloodstained count, who in a one-on-one fight was not much of a challenge. Moving through the third floor, the lack of electric resistance reared its head a couple of times. First with a Spriggan air mage, and second with a titan who resided in this Hotel Transylvania-esque building. But we soon cleared the floor and moved down to the final level of the depths. It is here we finally laid eyes on the fabled doorway, sealed with 3 rune-shaped sockets at its centre. Though we didn't have time to stand and admire the entrance, as there was a good amount of dragons and draconians guarding it and the surrounding area. Draconians are the primary inhabitants of the place with the currently sealed entrance, and come in a range of elemental flavours. These guys weren't all that difficult to deal with, however, and it was what lurked elsewhere that caused the most trouble. Vivi, the exile, happened to be wandering these depths, and she, with her powerful spells and attacks, forced us to use a teleport scroll. After resting up and exploring some more of the level, we soon found her again, although this time we buffed up with a potion of haste, and this was enough to take her out. Though I do still think we got somewhat lucky here. The sprawling mess of twisting corridors that was the rest of the level we cleared out without running into any more danger, and at long last the depths were now cleared. It was a relief to get such a nasty place done and rid of monsters, as seeing we were capable of surviving all that, where we were heading next seemed all the less daunting.
Possibly constructed by some powerful madman, the vaults are said to be home to great treasures. The blood splattered liberally around the entrance suggests that there is a certain amount of violence, too.
The vaults were where we were headed next, but before we set off, we purchased a ring of corrosion resistance from one of the merchants we found in the depths. This was not in preparation for the vaults, but for a branch we would be visiting later on, so looking back on it, I have no idea why I equipped it here. Now, a little quirk of the vaults is that you can only exit them if you have at least 1 rune. So you can enter them as soon as you find the entrance, and seek out the silver rune in order to exit. Although you would most certainly die. If not on the first 4 levels, Vaults 5 would kill you for sure. I'll explain more about that dreaded level later on. We soon enter and shake off the first lot of enemies. There are quite a few monsters here with ranged attacks, bows, crossbows and the like, so having an amulet of reflection is quite nice. Now, some notable threats of the vaults. The previously encountered slime creatures can be found here, with their ability to meld into a very dangerous heavy hitter. But of course there are some creatures exclusive to these silvery halls. Boggarts and iron-bound convokers are 2 enemies that can surround you with sizable groups of equally dangerous foes. Boggarts, though, only summon shadow creatures, which die as soon as it does. Convokers, on the other hand, call upon real enemies that are currently in the level as reinforcements. Decent cold resistance is also good to have here to resist the attacks of iron-bound frost hearts. And a staple enemy of the vaults is the Vault Warden, capable of sealing any doors and staircases in view. Honestly, it's in the vaults where dealing with one or small groups of enemies at a time really starts to do you wonders. The first level graced us with another Scroll of Acquirement, though what it presented us we had no need for, so we take the gold and move on, clearing the first floor with little to no trouble. We got ourselves into a bit of a predicament on the second floor, as we were chewing through a sizable group of enemies and a few managed to get some good damage off, though we were well stacked on teleport scrolls and so managed to escape. Doing so dispersed the group, making the rest of the level much more manageable. Moving to the third floor, our biggest concern was still the lack of any resistance to electric. We had at this point stacked up on most of the key resistances, but it would only take one competent foe wielding some form of lightning, aided by the other horrors in here, to bring us to our knees. Ironbound Thunderhawks came to mind. We were pretty swift to clear the third floor, and it's here we came across the entrance to the crypts. We would not be entering here during this adventure, as it is a good bit harder than the vaults, with its powerful undead enemies that lurk within, though it has its own branch, the Tombs, that contains its own Rune of Zot. Moving to the 4th floor of the vaults, we have little trouble clearing its long metallic halls. Now, there is a 5th and final level of the vaults. However, if you are unaware and should step down into this level, there is a great possibility that your adventure would come to a swift end. Vaults 5 is a massive step up in difficulty and contains some particularly nasty endgame level monsters. Not to mention, the entrance is always guarded by 24 vault guards, and there are often vault wardens as well, ready to seal you in as soon as you enter. So for obvious reasons, we do not enter. For now.
Whereas most elven folk would never move into a dark subterranean complex like this, the Deep Elves did. Their halls are filled with riches, but any passers-by should know of the legendary magical power of this species.
As you should remember, the Elven halls were located in the Orcish mines, although at the time we did not find the entrance, for the way was blocked from auto-explore. Upon arriving back at the mines, we quickly found what we had missed, and we clear out the small pocket containing the entrance. Then we descend into the halls. Now, the Elven halls are home to some of the nastiest spellcasters around, so naturally you're going to want high willpower, at least 3 points to avoid banishment and other atrocities. High health, armor, shield and evasion is pretty much a given if you want to survive, and most enemies here memorize some sort of elemental spell, so getting good resistance to fire, cold and especially electric will up your chances of survival greatly. We were covered on most of these attributes, though we still lacked electric resistance. And we were reminded a couple of times on the 1st floor that even if you are strong, getting spammed with magical attacks is still not a fun time. We cleared the 1st floor without anything going too far south though, but at the same time there was little here, besides a vault containing a man named Grockle. Now, as the 1st floor is usually largely uneventful, the 2nd and 3rd levels of the Elven halls have distinct features that are always present from adventure to adventure. Elf 2, for example, is nicknamed the Hall of Blades, and you'll soon see why. Before we reach anything of interest though, we encounter Zenata, Seeker of Sheza, who actually wasn't an issue after we gave her a bucket load of venom over several darts. But just on from her now dead body, lol, was the entrance to the Hall of Blades. Entering, we are straight away met with another unique enemy, Asterion, the Fallen King. Like us, he is a Minotaur and a worshipper of Makleb, though despite what we have in common, we quickly prove who is more devoted to the god of the hells. A deep elf blade master then showed up, and as a precaution, we quaff a potion of swiftness. These guys have extremely high evasion and can be difficult to deal with otherwise. After these threats were gone, it was a matter of clearing out the remaining elves and dancing weapons, before finally, the hall lay still. As the Hall of Blades didn't contain much besides a few scrolls and the piles of once animated weaponry, we moved down to the 3rd and final floor. Now, as we just foolishly went and dived straight into this level, we forgot that we'd actually just had a stroke of luck. You see, there is a chance that upon entering this particular level, you can be struck by a malevolent force and be teleported into the very large, very open vault, containing the bulk of the floor's enemies. So, you should prepare for this to happen, or if you feel you won't survive, maybe give this level a pass for the time being. Fortunately, we did not get teleported, and so we got to methodically clear out the rest of the level before locating and tackling the vault. There sometimes isn't a clear indicator that you're about to enter this thing, but if you turn the corner and see something like this, that's probably it. This small group of enemies quickly became much larger, and given we weren't in the most ideal spot to fight them, we, overwhelmed, read a teleport scroll and summoned a few demons to thin the crowd. Where we landed happened to be right next to a couple of Zephyrmancers, who actually gave us more trouble given our lack of electric resistance. We do make our way back to the vault, but this time get very close to dying. After using another teleport scroll to get out, we instead end up in one of the loot rooms, deeper into the vault. This proves less than ideal, so we use another to try and escape once again, but instead end up in an even worse position, right at the back of the vault, now out in the open. Luckily, we had drawn the horde up with the 2nd teleport, and a 3rd scroll finally gets us out of the elf pit, and we are able to rest. Heading back, this time we managed to properly enter, kill the remaining elves, and finally enjoy the fruits of our labour. 3 rooms filled with various magical items armor, weapons, scrolls, potions, and gold. Not much was gained from these rooms though, besides scrolls and a few throwables, but we did find a very nice ring amongst the remnants of the elves, the halls of which now lay empty, void of any leaf lovers or sorcerers. We, on the other hand, were feeling mighty strong, and our resistances were now looking pretty good, despite us still lacking some. But still, we felt we were ready to return to a previous branch to finish what we started. Now, you might be wondering why one level of an optional branch of the dungeon has its own chapter. Well, the 5th floor of the vaults, as I explained before we entered the Elven halls, is incredibly dangerous. Despite us not only feeling, but were really quite strong at this point, this level we were about to enter could have ended our adventure before we got a chance to explore half of it. However, we did have a plan. A strategy we first heard from a sentient pile of onions who claimed to eat pencil lead. That is very simple and goes like this. Before entering, we would read a teleport scroll to avoid the 24 vault guards and whatever else may be nearby. Then, once we were in, it would only be a few turns until we were relocated. Hopefully, not next to some horrendous abomination. Then, we would use a scroll of revelation to see the layout of the floor, and whatever was nearby. And we would go from there. So, this is exactly what we did. However, it took us 2 teleport scrolls before we managed to get to a position where we weren't inevitably about to die. Then, it was a matter of clearing out the chambers. Things were going quite well. That is, until a dancing halberd of distortion came around the corner, hit us twice, and cast us into the abyss. Back into the maddening, shifting passageways that were all too familiar. However, we had not been cast to an easy level of the abyss, like last time, no. We were 3 levels deeper than before, meaning this place now held a great deal more anguish and terrible creatures. Fortunately, we were not here for as long as when we were first banished, and soon we were graced with a shining staircase back out, before we ran into anything too nasty. As soon as we returned, it was straight back to clearing the vaults, and this time, things went a lot more smoothly. With most of the floor cleared, we entered one of the 4 chambers, and sure enough, our troubles were rewarded. Our 3rd rune, the Silver Rune. Picking it up, we feel its power. We then loot the other chambers, slaying the last dregs of enemies still hiding away, but acquire nothing more than potions and scrolls. We then made use of the search feature to check if we missed anything laying on the ground, and sure enough, there happened to be some golden dragon scales ripe for the taking. This armor is very nice. Not only does it provide good armor rating, but also resistance to fire and cold. Certainly a good find, considering we were nearing the climax of our adventure. And we now had 3 runes, meaning the gate to the realm of Zot could be opened. So you would assume that we would head straight there, and finally claim the mighty orb for ourselves. Well, there was one branch that we had missed. A certain slimy branch we had dared not enter until we knew we were very well prepared.
The slime pits are the amorphous realm of acids, jellies, and slimes. Even the walls drip with painful acid. Any form of intelligent life has long been dissolved. Still, there are rumours of great treasures deep down, hidden safely away in secret chambers without any entrance.
There is a reason we had left going here this late, despite it being a branch of the Lair of Beasts. That reason being, this place fucking sucks. And not just because it's wet and sticky. It is one of the few branches that has an end boss, who we will soon encounter. It is also one of the branches where you are highly likely to be twisted and deformed to the point where you'll either die amongst the slimes, or be so mutated that going anywhere with enemies means a swift end. Heading back to the lair, we rid the entrance of jellies and enter the pits. There is nothing to be found on the first 4 levels of this place, apart from slime, so it's not exactly worth exploring it in its entirety, unless you're looking for an easy exit after you finish. We do go about and clear every floor, but it doesn't exactly prove beneficial for us, as we soon encounter a shining eye. These things are one of the reasons this place is so terrible. They have one spell, Malmutate, which they can cast upon you so long you're in line of sight. To my knowledge, there is no way to resist this, so it's best practice to try and break line of sight or block the spell with other monsters or your own summons, as what this spell does is inflict a random bad mutation, from relatively tame things like lowered magic points, all the way to the thing that has ended several of my adventures, teleportitis. So do we do anything to prevent this? No. We use a couple of wands on the thing, and it immediately gazes upon us. We do kill it, but we had now acquired a bad mutation. Stepping down to the next floor, we encounter another one of these horrors, although this time we manage to kill it before it gets a chance to mutate us further. Now, an attribute you are going to want to make sure you have down here is resistance to corrosion, which may seem obvious given the acidic nature of this place. But the sheer amount of corrosion that can be stacked upon any who venture here, from acid blobs in particular, can be devastating. Even with this resistance, there can be instances where your armor and weapons get so corroded you might as well be fighting naked with a lump of iron. Slime creatures are also present here, because of course they are. No need to explain those again. But another creature to watch out for are Quicksilver Oozers. They have anti-magic attacks, but that doesn't really apply to us. More importantly though, they can engulf anything adjacent to them, preventing the use of scrolls and your divine abilities. We were now on the 4th floor of the slime pits, meaning the 5th and final level was near. And so was the boss. Before we reach the staircase though, we run into another shining eye. This time we do use a scroll of fog to try and break line of sight, but while trying to kill the thing, we end up getting malmutated once again. Now we were ready to enter the final level, but we should have, first, at least checked what bad mutations we had acquired while fighting those eyes. And then, if something was particularly nasty, you used potions of mutation to try and rid them. But since we were stupid, and whatever we did get wasn't immediately affecting us, we head down regardless. Soon after entering, we use a Scroll of Revelation. Not necessary, but the general strategy was to clear everything around the loot room first. Basically, the large open areas. But of course, this was easier said than done. We end up fighting another shining eye, and so we use our wand of Ice Blast like we had done previously. Only casting this wand is very loud, and unfortunately, this attracted the attention of the golden leader of the realm of slimes, the Royal Jelly. This thing doesn't have any ranged attacks, but it can hit you with some heavy acid attacks up close. Should you hit it, however, various jelly-type monsters will spring from its mass to attack you, getting quite numerous should you attack it a lot. It will then flee, leading you to fight whatever it spawned, before coming back to fight again. Upon seeing this creature, we straight away read a teleport scroll, as we were not prepared to fight it just yet. We were relocated directly into the loot chamber, and we take this downtime to finally check our bad mutations. That weren't the greatest, especially the inability to drink after injury, so we quaff our potions of mutation in hope to heal ourselves, and sure enough, just one does the trick. Slowly making our way back out the chamber, we loop back around and come face to face with the Great Jelly once again. This time, however, we make use of a couple of our invocable items. First, we invoke our Phantom Mirror, gaining us a Royal Jelly of our own. Then, after summoning a few infernal servants, we invoke our Sack of Spiders for some more backup. Then, in a matter of only a few moves, the Royal Jelly was slain, and the pits of slime were cleared. Making our way back into the loot chamber, we laid eyes upon our reward, no longer sealed away. The most important thing being the slimy rune of Zot, and picking it up, we feel its power. Pillaging the rest, we get a great deal more scrolls, potions, gold, as well as a few wands, and a rarer item, a manual of throwing, that increases our aptitude with darts and similar weapons. Now, at this point, we had only one place left to go, the place that required all this preparation, training, and ventures to diabolical places. The last domain, containing the goal of our quest.
The realm of Zot is a region of the dungeon so terrifying, so full of madness, frenzy, and lunacy that has been locked securely against random trespassers. Only the most demented adventurers would dare gather the required keys, break the seal, and penetrate deeper. all in the vain hope of a fabled artifact no one has ever laid eyes on before.
Before we headed to the gate, we searched the dungeon for any potions, in particular potions of heal wounds, because we had none, cracking open a couple of vaults to get some, located in the now quite familiar areas we'd once been wary of. Then we head to the very bottom of the depths, and up to the Golden Gate. We present 3 of our runes and delve inside. The Realm of Zot is the ultimate test for any normal adventurer. It has a limited monster pool compared to the rest of the branches, but the monsters that do reside here are some of the most deadly. The primary inhabitants are the Draconians, who I mentioned briefly before. Like I said, these guys can inflict a range of different damage types, from cold to fire to poison and even corrosive acid. And those are just the common types. There are a number of class Draconians, most of which are very competent spellcasters, who can call forth summons, translocate themselves and you, or just blast you with powerful destruction magic. There are regular dragons, of course, but only the most devilish. Shadow, Storm, Quicksilver, and of course, Golden. Not too bad on their own, especially at this point, but another creature, the Moth of Wrath, is also common here, capable of sending any nearby monsters into a berserk rage, and fighting a berserk golden dragon is not exactly fun. There are also toes that can summon mushrooms. There are a handful of more dangerous enemies, but they are found deeper into Zot, and for now we were focusing on clearing the first floor, which was going quite well. We did get marked, but that wasn't an issue after we fought it out in a narrow corridor, and after that we were ready for the next level. I should also note that while in Zot, teleportation scrolls take 5 to 9 more turns to kick in, so should you want to escape a hairy situation, better to use one early than for it to be too late. Exploring the second floor, we soon encounter one of the more dubious enemies of this place, the Killer Clown. They move fast, blink around like crazy, and throw pies at you. Said pies can inflict random status effects, including blindness, fire vulnerability, which can be very deadly later on, and the inability to drink potions. On their own, they aren't too bad, but they should not be taken lightly when surrounded by other monsters. We were very fortunate to find this one away from what was just around the corner, as opening a door, we faced Tiamat, the incredibly strong deity of the dragons. She has very high HP and can dish out some absurd damage, both at range and in melee. Instead of fleeing, however, we chose to fight her, which honestly was probably not the wisest choice. But instead of fighting her directly, we proceeded to summon as many demons on her and her followers as we could, following that up with some poison darts, and finishing her off with a few swings of our axe. Following this victory, we then run into a ghost moth, and things start to go downhill slightly. You see, we were not the smartest individual, after the incident with the potions of mutation a while ago. And there are enemies here, the ghost moth being one of them, that will drain your stats. If a stat goes below 0, then you start to get some quite bad effects. In our situation, our intelligence dropped below 0, and we became brainless and slow, and brainless meant we couldn't read scrolls. Okay, present day me here. In the latest version of this game, 0.33, stat drain has been removed entirely. The only way we're now able to get a stat to 0 is through mutations or certain artifacts, according to the wiki. So this is likely something that won't happen to you here anymore. We just so happen to be playing on a prior version, so sucked to be us, I guess. This was not exactly ideal, as even with teleport scrolls being less useful, we would still want to use blink scrolls to get away from anything particularly nasty. As I did mention before though, our stats would not be drained permanently, but this was not the last time we would have this happen to us. We soon cleared floors 2 and 3, and now we were but one floor away from the true final level. Sure enough, floor 4 came and went, cleared out without too much difficulty. Then, it was time to enter Zot 5. Entering, we straight away use a Scroll of Revelation. It is very useful to know the layout of this level, despite most of it not being randomly generated. You see, the area at the bottom, named the Hall of Zot, contains a great many traps. Knowing which side doesn't have a trap blocking the entrance is crucial for navigating inside, as should you lure an enemy into an alarm trap, things can go south very quickly. Speaking of enemies, this level is home to some of the most dangerous in the entire dungeon. It also doesn't help that it is very easy to get swarmed by said enemies, given it is very open here. So allow me to let you in on a little trick. a little cheese, if you will, for dealing with the horrors of Zot 5. That is, to take a wand of digging, should you have one, and dig diagonally into any part of the nearby wall. Then, luring any creatures you find into this kill box, you can much more safely deal with them one by one. Most of what we encountered first, though, were large groups of draconians, who we dealt with by simply dancing them up a staircase. These were in fact the only things inhabiting the top section of the level, so we soon cleared that and started on the hall. The first things to show up here were a few orb guardians, who aren't too bad on their own, but they will swarm you if you give them the chance. Then, making our way to the right side, the side that wasn't blocked with a trap, we use another scroll of revelation. Just below us, we see one of, if not the major threat of Zot 5, the Orb of Fire. Unsurprisingly, these guys can deal a hell of a lot of fire damage, but they also possess incredibly high HP, armor, and resist pretty much all elements. And the cherry on top, they can also malmutate you. Even with our strength, fighting one would mean going all out, using potions, scrolls, wands, anything to kill the creature, and we'd surely be dead fighting one alongside other monsters. So it was unfortunate when a draconian, summoned by a crystal statue, decided to trigger an alarm trap. Straight away, we rushed back to the top of the level, hoping to reach our kill box, which meant us using a couple of blink scrolls to avoid the rapidly approaching orbs of fire and onslaught of other horrors. We managed to reach it, quaff a potion of swiftness, and start chewing through the horde. The kill box proved to be very effective, and we kill off all that were chasing us. Heading back, we then get ourselves teleported by a dispersal trap, leading to us getting pummeled by a great many draconians, an electric golem, a golden dragon, and worst of all, a ghost moth. With our intelligence now at -1, we could do nothing more than stand and fight. Which, thankfully, with the help of a might potion, proved successful, and we managed to seek a safe spot and rest up. We were now brainless, meaning no more scrolls until our stat drain wore off. Still, we head back and continue to fight our way in. Then, at long last, while fighting a group of orb guardians, we lay eyes on the fabled orb itself. Wasting no time, we fight off the remaining creatures and gain access to the room containing it. And finally, we pick up the orb. Doing so, 3 things happened. The orb itself let out an agonizing shriek, alerting whatever was in the other side of the hall. We were notified that the Lords of Pandemonium were not amused, and that all we had to do now is get out of the dungeon. The home stretch had begun, which now meant a whole manner of demons, guardians, and potentially lords of the realm of Pandemonium were seeking to stop our ascent. So we had to be quick. You will be stopped, potentially by some of the most horrific looking creatures, but do not stop to fight them unless you absolutely have to. You may have escaped to Zot, but that doesn't mean you can't still die trying to escape. Hopefully you pull through, and maybe, with a bit of luck, you reach the familiar stone archway and escape victorious. Well, there you have it. Our dear Manfred managed to escape. What shall he do with the Orb of Zot? Man, I don't know, put it on his mantle or something? I hope this was a decent enough intro to Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. It has been a hell of a task creating this, but this game really just popped up and captivated me like no other. So I thought I'd try and give it the best video as I can. There is, though, still a lot I didn't cover. There is an entire magic system with quite literally tens, if not hundreds of spells across 11 different schools. A good amount of levels I didn't visit in this run, most containing their unique runes, and the rest of the playable races and classes besides Minotaur Fighter. And more I'm probably forgetting. Oh yeah, I didn't really cover skills and how to balance training them, as I thought this video might be a bit too overwhelming. If you made it this far, first off, well done. And if I haven't sold you on this game, then go try the game for yourself. I promise you, it has a way of drawing you in like nothing I've played before. I mean, it possessed me to make an entire album, so if that doesn't tell you how much genius went into making this game, I don't know what does. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like me to cover this game again, going over the stuff I missed, do let me know. With that, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Bye bye.